Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Carl Jung. There comes a point in every person's life when, without warning, something inside quietly shatters. It's not exactly sadness. It's not outright anger. It's something deeper, as if the soul itself has grown tired. Tired of carrying the weight of other people's expectations. Tired of clinging to relationships that take more than they give. Tired of squeezing yourself into spaces you've long outgrown. And in that quiet, invisible moment, something profound begins to stir, what Carl Jung called the first true step toward individuation. It's the breaking point where the mask slips away and the real self starts to surface. But this moment rarely arrives with drama or warning. There's no booming voice from the sky. No date circled on the calendar saying, "Today you will free yourself." It doesn't show up when you feel ready. It comes when you need it most. Often, it follows countless nights spent telling yourself that things will get better. That maybe if you just change, try harder, or swallow that heavy feeling in your chest, everything will finally fall into place. But it never does. It never fits. And then, somewhere in the middle of emotional exhaustion, the decision happens. The decision to finally say, enough. To Jung, this isn't a whim or a fleeting emotional reaction. It's a call from the unconscious. A deep, undeniable message from within. A silent cry that's been waiting years to be heard. And once you answer that call, there's no going back. Because when you let go of what no longer belongs to you, when you step toward your authentic self, the old version of you begins to fade. In its place, someone new begins to take shape, someone stronger, more aware, more alive. Many people misunderstand this. They see saying no more as rebellion. But in truth, it's an act of radical self-love. It's not the end of something, it's the beginning. So why is it so hard? Why do we hold on even when we know something is hurting us? Jung's answer was painfully clear. We often build our identity around the very things that cause our suffering. For years, you may have been telling yourself the same story. You justify your pain with thoughts like, "That's just how life is. I can't change it. Maybe I deserve this. What if I end up alone?" Over time, your unconscious accepts these beliefs as truth, and they quietly shape your reality. So you stay. You stay in relationships that offer no growth. You stay in jobs that slowly drain your spirit. You stay in patterns that leave you exhausted. And the worst part? A part of you starts to believe this is normal, but it's not. Jung taught that the soul is always reaching for its own evolution. And that growth demands we release what no longer fits who we truly are. To do that, we have to face something we've long avoided, the shadow. The shadow is every part of you you've been taught to hide. The desires, the emotions, the truths you've labeled as unacceptable. And here's the thing, the shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It still shows up. It hides in the patterns you repeat, the situations you attract, and the quiet anxieties you can't quite explain. So when you finally say, no more, you're facing your shadow head-on. You're dismantling the beliefs that kept you trapped. You're letting an old version of yourself die so a new one can be born. That's why it hurts. That's why it's so hard. Because you're not just letting go of a person, a job, or a circumstance. You're letting go of the self you've known for years. The self that gave you excuses, comfort, and safety. But that version no longer serves you. It's no longer you. When you make the choice to let go, your unconscious resists. Fear rushes in. You start questioning yourself. You wonder if you've made a mistake. This is the moment when many people retreat. But here's the truth. Fear doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're changing. The unconscious is built to keep you in the familiar, in what it knows. But your soul has a different plan. And this is where the real inner battle begins, between the comfort of the old and the uncertainty of the new. If you can hold your ground, if you can push through the chaos without looking back, something extraordinary happens. You start to reclaim your energy. Jung called it a kind of psychic rebirth. For years, your energy has been scattered, tied up in situations that held you back. Every time you endured something you didn't want, you handed over a piece of your vitality. Every time you silenced yourself out of fear of rejection, you drifted further from your essence. But when you finally let go, all of that energy returns to you. It feels almost magical. What once seemed impossible suddenly becomes clear. What once hurt no longer cuts as deep. What once felt essential suddenly loses its hold on you. And then comes the most beautiful part, something no one tells you until you experience it for yourself. The self-love that rises after saying, enough, is unlike any other love you've known. It doesn't rely on approval. It doesn't crave validation. It's born from within, from the unshakable knowing that you are enough exactly as you are. And once you feel that, truly feel it, your life will never be the same again. You stop searching outside for what has always been within you. You stop settling for scraps because you finally understand your real worth. You stop waiting for someone else to save you, because you realize you've always had the power to save yourself. And it's in that moment that everything begins to fall into place. Not because the universe is rewarding you for making the right choice, but because, for the first time, you are aligned with what was always meant to be yours. Relationships shift. Paths open. Opportunities appear. Not because you've suddenly changed your actions, but because, for the first time, you are fully being yourself. But the journey doesn't end there. Because once you find self-love, there's something else you must face, something that will shape the rest of your life. When you begin to feel the self-love that comes after saying, no more, something in how you see the world changes. You used to explain away toxic behavior, downplay red flags, and tolerate what deep down you knew wasn't right. But now, with a new awareness of yourself, you can't overlook what once passed unnoticed. It's as if you've woken from a long sleep, seeing reality clearly for the very first time. What once felt normal now feels unbearable. The excuses you used to tell yourself no longer make sense. And this is where one of the deepest transformations happens. You begin to see people for who they truly are, not who you wished they would be. For years, you told yourself that if you tried hard enough, if you were patient enough, if you gave enough, you could make someone see your worth. That you could be so good, so understanding, so loyal, that one day you would finally receive the love and respect you deserved. But now you understand the simple, liberating truth. It was never your job. No matter how much love you give, you cannot fill the emptiness in someone who refuses to fill it themselves. Carl Jung taught that when a person hasn't integrated their shadow, the hidden parts of themselves they refuse to face, they project their inner conflicts onto others. This is why so many relationships repeat the same destructive cycles. A person who hasn't confronted their own darkness will, often without realizing it, seek someone to serve as a mirror, someone to absorb their chaos. And if in the past you were that person, if you allowed someone to unload their wounds onto you while avoiding responsibility for them, it was because you hadn't yet learned a vital lesson. You were never there to heal them. You were there to learn how to heal yourself. When you finally say, enough, when you step out of that cycle, something unexpected happens. The people who once controlled you with guilt, manipulation, or empty promises start to reveal their true selves. Some respond with anger. Some try to make you feel as if you're the one failing. Some say you've changed. And the truth is, they're right. You have changed. You're no longer the person who tolerated the intolerable. You're no longer the one who stayed silent out of fear of losing love. Self-love is not just a passing emotion. It's a foundation. Once built, it becomes the base for your entire life. But to make it solid, you have to face the hardest test of all, solitude. Because when you release what no longer serves you, you create an empty space. A space once filled with relationships, habits, and beliefs that, though painful, were familiar. And in that space, uncertainty arrives, fear creeps in. The fear that you made the wrong choice. The fear of being alone. The fear you may never find something better. This is when you must remember what Jung said. The unconscious does not seek comfort, it seeks transformation. And transformation always brings chaos before it brings clarity. In this stage, nostalgia can cloud your vision. There will be moments when you miss what you left behind, not because you truly want it back, but because your mind hasn't yet adjusted to freedom. That sense of loss is only temporary. Because deep down, you know with absolute certainty, you could never go back to who you were before you woke up. And that's when something extraordinary happens. You start attracting completely different things, not because you're desperately trying to fill the void, but because you're now resonating at a different frequency. Jung said that what you experience externally is a mirror of your inner world. When you were broken inside and didn't value yourself, you drew people and situations that reinforced that belief. But now that you've claimed your worth, now that you know self-love is non-negotiable, everything changes. The people you once connected with no longer fit into your life, not because you've pushed them away, but because they no longer match your energy. Situations you once tolerated now feel impossible to accept. And instead of wondering if you're being too demanding, you realize you're simply setting a new standard. You no longer accept less than what you deserve, not out of arrogance, but because you finally respect yourself. And here is where many people turn back. Because transformation is never a straight path. There are moments of progress and moments that feel like setbacks. The key is not to let doubt pull you back into the past. The key is trusting that everything you've left behind was never meant to be permanent. The pain, the fear, the loneliness, these are not signs that you're lost. They are proof that you're growing. So if today you feel like you're in the middle of the storm, remember this. The version of you that accepted less, that made excuses, that settled, that version is gone. You are not lost. You are becoming. And that is the most powerful transformation of all. Jung believed that the greatest obstacle on the path to self-discovery is the fear of emptiness. And it's true, emptiness can feel overwhelming, even frightening. But what no one ever told us is that this void is sacred. It is the space where transformation begins. If you rush to fill it, if you cling to the familiar just to escape uncertainty, you will never discover what was truly meant for you. That's why, after you decide to walk away, after you free yourself from what was holding you back, the most important step is to embrace the void. Sit with it. Explore who you are without all the emotional baggage. Because something powerful happens when you resist the urge to fill that space with the first thing that comes along. Clarity emerges. The kind of clarity that once felt out of reach. The deep realization that you don't need anything external to feel whole. And when you arrive at this understanding, when you finally grasp what it means to truly love yourself, life begins responding in ways you never imagined. You are no longer acting from scarcity, but from abundance. You no longer chase love, you radiate it. You no longer beg for attention, you naturally attract it. You no longer settle for the bare minimum, because now you know your worth. And that shift, that new version of you, begins to reshape everything around you. The people who enter your life now aren't looking to take from you, they want to share in your energy. The opportunities that once felt impossible now seem within reach, not because the world has changed, but because you have. And this is where true magic happens. Because when you become someone who genuinely loves themselves, when you fully embody this transformation, you don't just change your own life, you become a light for others. You show that letting go is possible, that renewal is real, that living in alignment with your truth is the only way forward. But this is just the beginning. Because once you awaken to this power within, there's one final challenge, making the transformation permanent. When you step into the self-love that comes from saying, no more, you feel a freedom unlike anything before. But this is also when many are tested, tempted to return to the past. Not because they want the pain back, but because the unknown still feels unsettling. Your mind will try to deceive you, replaying only the good memories of what you left behind, downplaying the pain, whispering, "What if it wasn't that bad? What if I never find something better? What if I overreacted?" But now you know the truth. You know that every time you excused your pain, you only prolonged it. You know that every time you stayed where you weren't valued, you denied yourself growth. And most importantly, you know going back is no longer an option. The version of you that tolerated the intolerable is gone. Jung taught that every meaningful experience expands the human psyche. You cannot shrink back into your old self after waking up. Trying to do so only creates more suffering, because deep down, you no longer belong to that outdated version of yourself. Yet life will still test you. Maybe the person you walked away from will return. Maybe a familiar situation will reappear in disguise. But this time, you have something you didn't have before: awareness. When you commit to evolving, when self-love becomes your foundation, you gain the ability to see truth without illusion. And the truth is simple. Anything that asks you to betray your peace has no place in your life. Any relationship that requires you to shrink yourself is not love. It is a cage dressed up as companionship. This is where many stumble. They mistake attachment for love. They think missing something means they still need it, when in reality, it's only the final traces of an old emotional habit fading away. Missing something does not mean you made the wrong choice. It means your mind is recalibrating. Your subconscious is shedding years of conditioning. The real proof of growth isn't in how much pain you feel after letting go. It's in what you choose to do with the emptiness that follows. If you fill it with the first thing that appears, with something that brings only temporary comfort, you'll end up trapped in the same cycles. But if you use that space to reconnect with yourself, to dig deeper, to align with your true desires, then you are preparing for something entirely new. Life responds to the energy you project. When you were broken, you attracted from a place of fear and need. But now that you've learned to be at peace within yourself, everything shifts. Relationships are no longer built on the fear of loneliness, but on genuine connection. You no longer settle for less because you no longer feel desperate for love. Now what you give comes from wholeness, not emptiness, and the difference is profound. The most fascinating part of this journey is that once you stop searching outside for what has always been within, everything changes. Everything begins to align naturally. Synchronicity, a concept Jung explored deeply, starts to manifest in your life. You no longer feel like you're swimming against the current. Things simply flow. The answers you once hunted for in desperation appear at just the right moment. The people who truly resonate with you begin to enter your life effortlessly. And most importantly, you are no longer afraid. Because when you truly understand your worth, when you've experienced the power of unconditional self-love, you know that never again will you let anyone define you, mold you, or make you feel small. External validation becomes irrelevant because your inner validation is unshakable. This is the moment when transformation becomes permanent. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer seek the world's acceptance because you've learned to accept yourself. You've integrated your shadow, absorbed your lessons, and now walk with a certainty you never had before. It's a level of peace you can't explain in words. You can only feel it. And this is where something unexpected happens. When you change in this way, some people from your past will try to come back. Not because they've changed, but because they sense they no longer have power over you. Where they once manipulated you, they now see you are unshakable. Where they once played with your emotions, they realize they can no longer throw you off balance. And this confuses them, not because you hate them or seek revenge, but because they now see something in you that was always there, your power. The only difference is that now you see it too. Now you know who you are. Now you know what you deserve. And when you reach this point, there's no going back. You're no longer interested in proving yourself. You no longer feel the need to explain who you are. You no longer try to convince others of your worth. You simply are, and that is the greatest victory of all. Because when you arrive at this state of authentic self-love, life stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like creation. You're no longer trapped in cycles of pain. You're no longer repeating old wounds. Now you consciously choose what you allow into your life, because you understand that everything around you is a reflection of what you believe you deserve. And now you finally know your worth. That is the real meaning of self-love. It's not about being perfect or never having doubts. It's about knowing, deep in your bones, that you will never again settle for less than what you truly deserve. Because in the end, it's a choice. Keep living according to other people's expectations, or dare to live the life you truly desire. The moment you fully understand your worth is the moment your life changes forever. It's like waking up from an illusion that kept you trapped in cycles of suffering, stagnant relationships, and a distorted idea of love. And when you realize you will never again allow anything or anyone to make you question your worth, everything around you begins to shift. At first, it might feel strange. You're used to the struggle, to justifying the unjustifiable, to postponing your peace in the hope that things would get better. But now, in this new awareness, you can no longer betray yourself. You can no longer ignore the signs. That makes you different, not because your essence has changed, but because you've reconnected with it. People from your past may say you're no longer the same, and they're right. You're no longer available for the dynamics you once accepted. You no longer excuse the absence of reciprocity. You no longer try to fit into spaces where you're not welcomed. Because now you understand that every time you ignored your intuition, you were choosing your own suffering. Carl Jung said that when we repress our truth, the unconscious will find ways to bring it to the surface, through dreams, physical symptoms, anxiety, or a constant sense of emptiness. For years you ignored those signs, convincing yourself it was normal to feel that way. But now you see clearly, it was never normal to carry that emotional weight. It was never normal to stay where you weren't valued. It was never normal to silence your intuition just to make others comfortable. The difference now is that you've learned to listen. You've learned to hear what your soul has been saying all along. And most importantly, you've learned to trust yourself. Because that is the essence of self-love. It's trust. Trust that your feelings are valid. Trust that you deserve something better. Trust that you don't have to cling to what no longer feeds your spirit. When you become someone who truly respects themselves, life reflects that respect back to you in every way. Not because you've become stronger in the traditional sense, but because you no longer settle for less than you deserve. And here's the most fascinating part. You don't even have to try hard to make this happen. It's an energy shift. When you raise your standards, when you refuse to tolerate the intolerable, the people who once thrived on your low self-worth begin to drift away on their own. They can no longer manipulate you. They can no longer use you as a dumping ground for their chaos. And if they try, they quickly see, you're not the same person anymore. This is the point where some people feel fear. Not because they want to return to who they used to be, but because the space left after letting go of toxicity can feel intimidating. There will be moments when you question your choice. But in those moments, you only need to remember one simple truth. Self-love doesn't feel like instant euphoria. It feels like peace. The kind of peace that once felt impossible. The peace you used to search for in others, but now have found within yourself. A peace that no longer depends on what someone else does or doesn't do, because you now understand that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself, and that changes everything. At this new level of awareness, challenges won't disappear. The temptation to go back may still appear. But the difference now is that you can see the truth. You can recognize what's real and what's just an illusion from the past. You don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to explain. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth, because you know it, you feel it, you live it. And this is where the real transformation happens. Because when you live from this place, when self-love becomes your natural state, something incredible unfolds. You stop seeking to impress anyone. You stop chasing validation. You stop obsessing over being understood, because you realize not everyone is ready for this transformation. Some people will say you've changed too much, that you're no longer the same, and they'll be right. But what they don't understand is that you haven't changed to fit into a new mold. You've changed because you finally broke free from one. When you live with self-love, your energy feels different. It's as if the things that once consumed you no longer have the same effect. You no longer react to manipulation. You no longer get weighed down by guilt. You no longer allow someone who's unsure of what they want to make you question what you know you want. That clarity, that certainty, is what finally awakens the power that was always within you. Life becomes simpler. Not because challenges disappear, but because now you know which battles are worth fighting and which are not. You know you don't need to prove yourself. You know that what's meant for you will arrive without forcing it. You know that when something doesn't flow, it's not a challenge to conquer, it's a sign it's not your path. And when you reach this point, you realize something surprising. You no longer have any interest in going back. Because at the end of the day, everything comes down to one choice. Keep repeating the patterns that bring you pain, or dare to create an entirely new reality. You've already made your choice. Never again will you ignore your intuition. Never again will you settle for what doesn't serve you. Never again will you let anyone define your worth. Because now you understand something that changes everything. Self-love is not a destination. It's a journey. And now you're finally walking in the right direction. When you discover the self-love that emerges after saying, "No more," there is no turning back. What once felt like an inner battle now becomes absolute clarity. Uncertainty fades because you no longer need anyone to confirm your worth. You already know it. And here lies the key to everything. The world responds to the energy you project. Now that you've reconnected with yourself, now that you've learned to respect, honor, and release what no longer serves you, life begins to align with this new version of you. Because when you walk with certainty, when you've left behind the doubts and fears that once trapped you, everything authentic begins to gravitate toward you. Maybe before, you struggled to understand why some people seemed to move forward effortlessly while you felt stuck. But now you know the truth. It wasn't life working against you. It was you holding on to what no longer had a place in your growth. Now you see it clearly. Now you understand that what happened to you wasn't a punishment, it was a lesson. Now you realize that every relationship, every experience, every loss had a purpose, to lead you here. To this moment where you finally recognize yourself, where you finally choose yourself, where you finally decide to live in harmony with who you truly are. And this is where the real magic begins. Because when you change, your environment changes. When you transform, the people who enter your life are different. When you raise your standards, the universe responds with opportunities, connections, and experiences that match your new level of awareness. And all of this starts with a single decision. The decision to never again accept less than what you deserve. Now that you have this clarity, I want you to do something. Don't keep this message to yourself. Share it with someone who needs it. Someone still trapped in the cycle you've already broken free from. Because what you've just heard isn't just a reflection, it's a tool for transformation. Leave a comment below and tell me what part of this message resonated with you. We want to hear from you. We want to know what stage of this journey you're in and what you've learned from your own experience. If this content has touched your soul, help us spread it to more people. Share this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so we can keep growing together on this path of self-discovery and transformation. Remember, every time you engage with this content, you're not only helping yourself, you're also helping others receive this message at the exact moment they need it most. Together, we can build a community of people who have chosen to awaken, to release what no longer belongs to them, and to step forward into the life they truly deserve. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for daring to choose yourself. See you in the next video. Remember, change starts with you.